I'm 104 years old, and every morning I wake up surprised that I still know my own name. At this age, you don't take your memory for granted. You hold it the way you'd hold a thin porcelain cup, careful, aware it could slip. Most of the women I grew up with are gone now. Some left slowly, piece by piece, their minds fading before their bodies did. I sat beside them in nursing homes while they searched my face and couldn't place it. I watched daughters explain again and again, "Mama, it's me." That's a particular kind of sorrow, to be alive but unreachable. People ask me how I avoided Alzheimer's, as if I found a secret door somewhere and quietly slipped through it while others weren't looking. I don't have a miracle to offer. I have a life, and maybe that's the only answer I can give. At 104, you live in the present differently. I wake before the sun most days. I sit on the edge of my bed and wait for my feet to remember the floor. I say the names of the people I've loved, my husband Daniel, my sister Ruth, my boy Thomas. I say them out loud. I don't want their names to grow dusty inside me. I know time is short. That's not dramatic. It's just arithmetic. But I have my mind. I can still walk through my childhood home in my thoughts. I can still smell my mother's bread. I can still see the red ribbon I wore the day Daniel first kissed me behind the church hall. Those things are intact. They sit where I left them. And I didn't protect them with vitamins or crossword puzzles alone. When I was young, in my 20s, I didn't think about old age at all. I was busy trying to be useful. That was the word we used then, useful. I married at 23. Daniel worked long hours at the factory, and I took a job at the school as a secretary. It wasn't glamorous. I typed letters, answered phones, wiped down desks after the children left. I told myself I was building something steady. That steadiness mattered more than anything. We bought a small house with yellow siding. I remember the first night we slept there. We lay on the floor because we hadn't moved the bed yet. We laughed at nothing. We believed we had endless time. In my 30s, I began to understand how quickly years stack up. Thomas was born when I was 32. He had a cry that sounded like a rusty hinge. I was tired all the time, but it was a sweet tiredness. I thought exhaustion was proof of love. I didn't realize then how easy it is to postpone living while you're busy surviving. There were always reasons to wait. Wait until the mortgage was smaller. Wait until Daniel got a raise. Wait until Thomas was older. I kept putting aside small joys because I assumed there would be more time later. Trips we never took. Friends I meant to visit. Even small things like sitting still on the porch in the evenings instead of washing one more dish. But I did something, without knowing it, that I believe saved my mind. I stayed curious, not in a grand way. I never traveled the world. I didn't go back to school, but I paid attention. I asked people about their lives. I listened to their answers fully, without planning what I'd say next. When the new teacher came to the school in 1968, young and nervous, I invited her for supper. She talked about books I'd never heard of. Instead of nodding politely and letting it drift past me, I wrote the titles down. I went to the library. I read slowly, sometimes twice. I let my brain stretch, even when it was uncomfortable. I kept reading after Thomas left for college. The house grew quiet then, quieter than I was prepared for. Daniel and I walked around each other, unsure how to fill the empty rooms. Some couples crumble in that silence. We nearly did. He had given himself to work for so long that he didn't know how to sit still. I had given myself to caretaking. We looked at each other one evening and realized we were strangers who shared a history. It would have been easy to let that distance harden, to retreat into separate corners of the house. I saw that happen to neighbors, the slow freeze of a marriage. Instead, we started talking again, not about bills or groceries, about what scared us, about aging, about regret. We admitted things we had swallowed for years. He told me he feared dying unnoticed. I told him I feared being forgotten while still alive. Those conversations weren't comfortable, but they woke something up inside my mind. They forced me to examine myself, to articulate feelings I had buried under routine. I believe the brain likes honesty. I think it withers under silence. In my 50s, my sister Ruth began to slip. At first it was small. She misplaced her purse, forgot the way to the grocery store she'd used for 20 years. We joked about senior moments. We didn't want to see it. Then one afternoon she called me crying because she couldn't remember how to boil an egg. That's when fear moved in. I spent hours with her after that, not correcting her, but walking beside her confusion. I'd ask her about our childhood. Sometimes she remembered. Sometimes she stared at me as if I were describing someone else's life. Sitting with her taught me something heavy. Memory is not just a filing cabinet, it's tied to emotion. The stories she held on to the longest were the ones soaked in feeling. The day our father came home from the war. The night our mother sang, even though there was no money for Christmas gifts, facts faded, feelings lingered. So I began to tend to my feelings more carefully. I didn't let resentments sit for decades. I didn't pretend hurt wasn't hurt. When Daniel and I argued, I tried to resolve it before sleep. Not perfectly. We failed many times, but I didn't let bitterness calcify. Bitterness, I think, is a kind of forgetting. You forget the full humanity of the person in front of you. You reduce them to a single offense. That shrinking does something to the mind. I kept moving too. Not in a gym, just in life. I gardened, I pulled weeds, I carried groceries. I danced in the kitchen when a song I loved came on the radio. Movement reminds you that you're still here. But if you're looking for a simple rule, this is the closest I can come. I stayed engaged. When Daniel died at 78, I thought my mind might shatter from grief. 45 years of marriage, and then a quiet hospital room with machines humming. I remember holding his hand after he was gone. It was still warm. I kept thinking, this warmth will leave. It always leaves. For months afterward, I moved through fog. I misplaced my keys. I forgot appointments. I worried it had begun. But grief is not the same as decline. It's heavy, but it's alive. Instead of shrinking into the house, I forced myself outward. I joined a small group at the community center. We met once a week to discuss books. I was the oldest there by nearly 20 years. At first, I felt foolish speaking up. My voice trembled. Then one evening, a young man said, "I never thought of it that way," after I shared my opinion. Something lit up inside me. Not pride, recognition. I still had something to offer. That matters more than people think. I've seen too many elders treated like fragile furniture, spoken over, decided for. Slowly they begin to believe they are already half gone, and the mind listens to that. Thomas lives in another state now. He calls every Sunday. Sometimes he worries about me living alone. I tell him I'm not alone. I have my neighbors, I have my books, I have the sparrows that argue in my yard every morning. Loneliness visits, of course, at night especially. There are hours when the house feels too large. I sit in Daniel's old chair and let the memories come. I don't push them away, even the painful ones. I think avoiding Alzheimer's for me has been less about chasing health and more about refusing to disappear from my own life. I never stopped learning small things. In my 80s, I learned how to use a computer, slowly, clumsily. My grandson laughed the first time I typed with one finger, but eventually I could send emails. I could look up old photographs. I could read newspapers from towns I'd never see in person. It wasn't about the machine. It was about telling my brain, we're not done. In my 90s, I began writing letters to my younger self, not to rewrite anything, just to remember clearly. I wrote about the nights I chose laundry over laughter, about the times I said later when I should have said now. I let myself feel the regret fully. Regret doesn't rot you if you face it. It teaches you. The turning point, if there was one, came when Ruth no longer recognized me at all. I walked into her room and she smiled politely, like I was a volunteer. I said, "It's me, your sister." She nodded, but her eyes stayed blank. On the drive home, I pulled the car over and cried harder than I ever had. Not just for her, for the fragile thread of memory that holds us together. That day, I made a quiet promise. I would keep telling my story. Even if no one asked, I would speak my memories out loud. I would revisit them, turn them over, keep them warm. Memory needs rehearsal, not obsessive repetition, just attention. Now, at 1:04, I spend part of each afternoon remembering on purpose. I sit by the window and choose a year, 1954, 1972, 1999. I let the details surface, the wallpaper, the smell of rain, the sound of Thomas running down the hallway. Some days it's harder, some days names hover just out of reach. I don't panic. Fear tightens the mind. I breathe. I wait. Usually it comes back. And if one day it doesn't, I hope someone will sit beside me and speak gently, the way I did for Ruth. You want to know how to avoid Alzheimer's? I can't promise anything. Bodies are mysterious, brains even more so. But don't abandon yourself. Don't postpone every joy. Don't let work swallow your curiosity. Don't let pride keep you from hard conversations. Stay interested in other people. Let yourself be changed by what you learn. Move your body. Use your hands. Read things that challenge you. Forgive when you can. Apologize when you must. Say the names of the people you love out loud, and understand that memory is not just information. it's connection, it's emotion, it's participation in your own days. I have outlived almost everyone who once knew me as a young woman. Sometimes that feels like standing alone in a field after the fair has packed up. The lights are gone. The music has faded. But I remember the music. I can still hum it. That is enough. If you are younger than I am, and you almost certainly are, don't assume there will always be more time to live deeply. I did that for years. I was lucky. I was given more decades than most, but luck is not a plan. Look at your life closely. Are you present in it, or are you always preparing for a later that may not arrive? I am 104, and I still know who I am. Not because I was perfect, not because I ate the right foods every day or solved every puzzle, but because I stayed awake to my own existence. One day I will close my eyes and not open them again. That doesn't frighten me the way it once did. What would frighten me more is leaving without having truly been here. So I have been here, in my marriage, in my grief, in my mistakes, in my small kitchen dances, in my quiet afternoons of remembering. If any of this means something to you, hold on to your days a little tighter, not in fear, just in attention. That's all I've done. And somehow at 104, my mind is still my own.